My wife, Debbie, and I just recently moved to our new apartment because we just had my son, Mickey. The other night, I heard my son laughing with someone on his baby monitor. I assumed my wife was playing with him, so I just smiled and went back to sleep. The next morning, when I went to pick Mickey up out of his crib, I noticed some red blotches on his back. A little startled, my wife and I drove Mickey to the hospital, where the doctor said these marks looked like his skin was irritated from his blanket, so we went to the store to get him a new one. At the store, I mentioned to my wife that I heard Mickey laughing with her on the baby monitor last night. She looked puzzled and said she wasn't with him last night, and that she thought I was. We were both confused and figured he was just laughing because he was bored. The night after, Mickey was laughing again, but this time I heard a woman's voice, so it had to be my wife. I smiled and just listened, and after a minute or so, something terrifying happened that made my heart sink. I saw my wife, right next to me, turn over in her sleep. Though I was scared to death, I knew I had to protect my son from whoever or whatever was in his room. I grabbed the screwdriver, which thankfully was left in my room from assembling the bed frame, and slowly walked down the hall. Prepared for the worst, I clenched the screwdriver and turned on the light in my son's room. Nothing was there, and there were no traces of anything being in his room as of that night. Everything was still in its place. I was confused but thankful that nothing was in his room. But the marks on his back were even darker than before, and there seemed to be tiny nail marks on his back. But Mickey didn't seem to be bothered by it. He was still my happy little baby like he had been. I still didn't want to leave him in his room because I didn't want him getting hurt from any hazards in there. The next day, my wife and I took him to the doctor again and showed him the new marks. He said the marks seemed to be scratches from some sort of small animal like a rat, but for some reason they were very light, but hard enough to irritate the skin. I didn't know what to do, so my wife and I slept on an air mattress in Mickey's room. This way we could make sure there was nothing hurting him. I called an exterminator and he said he couldn't come to help for another week. Just to verify that we had rats, I set several traps in every room. There are 3 rooms in the house. Throughout the whole night, not a single trap went off, and nothing disturbed Mickey. But the part that was a little scary was that he didn't laugh the whole night either. Even when we got up to change or feed him. In the morning, I saw a dead rat next to the kitchen table, but I hadn't set a trap there. It was weird, but I didn't think anything of it. That was until I saw something that literally made me vomit. I saw a hole in the wall, near the floor. And in that hole were several rats, which were dismembered and looked like something bit them, but the teeth marks were like nothing I'd ever seen before. I didn't want to scare my wife, so I disposed of the rat corpses and cleaned up the mess on my own. Told her that the rats were taken care of. At this point, I couldn't sleep. I knew something strange was going on, but didn't know what to do about it. We don't have any pets, and there are no wild animals around that could get into our house without us noticing. I decided I would stay up all night to see what was going on. I made the excuse to my wife that we should continue to sleep in Mickey's room just until the marks on his body are gone. She agreed. Though I did spend the night in my son's room, I refused to sleep and stayed awake to keep watch all night. I kept my pocket knife near me, but nothing happened. I changed Mickey's diaper once, and he made 0 noise throughout the night. I hesitated to leave my wife and Mickey at home to go to work, but I came up with a solution of asking our friends from a couple blocks down the street to check on Debbie and Mickey every hour or 2. They happily agreed. Relieved, I went to work. I'm a nurse at a local nursing home. The workday was normal, except for one thing. I love making the residents smile, and was informed that we had a new resident. Miss Rob, who ran the computer with all of our residents' names on it, said that her name was Roma Gill. Miss Rob said, "This is going to be a tough one to make smile, Sean." When I asked why, she said that this was one of the meanest old ladies we've ever had. I took this as a challenge. I was on a mission to make Miss Gill smile. When I walked into Miss Gill's room, she was under a blanket with only her eyes showing. I greeted her with a smile and introduced myself, trying my best to make her feel welcome. But she simply rolled her eyes and rolled over. I started telling her about myself and my wife. Trying to have a conversation with her, I asked about her family. She barked at me that her husband was dead and that she could never have kids. When I heard that, I told her that I was sorry to hear about it and that I couldn't imagine my life if Mickey hadn't made it into the world. And I mentioned how he had been getting unsightly marks on his back from rats, but we had gotten rid of them. It seemed that as soon as I mentioned this, she was furious and screamed a heinous scream to get out of my room. And to my surprise, she got up and tried to push me out of her room. After this, I tried to ask her to please not touch me, but mid-sentence she bit me, causing me to lose my patience and leave the room. Not wanting to draw any more attention to myself than Miss Gill had already given me, I went on with my day.